right, forget everything you think you know about minimalism. Seriously, we're not talking about those sterile white walls or, owning just 3 shirts. Today, we're going to dive into what minimalism really is, a powerful, fundamental principle for making sense of our ridiculously complex world. So, let's get into it. Okay, it all starts with a number that should honestly blow your mind. And that number is 4. Just 4. Think about that for a second. Our entire, seemingly infinite universe, all its chaos and complexity, we're talking everything from colliding galaxies down to the biology inside our own cells, it's all governed by just 4 fundamental forces. That's it. Nature itself, it turns out, is the ultimate minimalist. And this is the perfect illustration of how that works. You've seen a starling murmuration, right? Thousands of birds flying in this perfect hypnotic unison. It looks impossibly complex. But here's the thing. Scientists figured out they're just following 2 or 3 incredibly simple rules. Things like stay close to your neighbor, but not too close. And get this, we've taken those same few rules and taught them to drone swarms, and now they can fly in perfect formation too. It's just incredible order from just a few minimal inputs. So if minimalism is nature's big secret, you could say it's also humanity's superpower. And this isn't just about the cosmos anymore. This is about our own minds. This is where it gets personal. Because it turns out, we have this unique ability to master complexity by finding these very same minimal patterns. And this is explained perfectly by a concept from linguistics, of all places, called the economy principle. Just think about it for a second. Language, it's one of the most complex systems we ever have to deal with. And yet, toddlers all over the world master it. How? How do they do that? Well, they're not memorizing millions of sentences, that's for sure. They're actually internalizing a surprisingly small, minimal set of core patterns and rules. And those few rules allow them to generate a nearly infinite number of new expressions. They learn little to understand a lot. Okay, and this right here brings us to the biggest, most common misconception about minimalism today. It is not about just getting rid of your stuff. That whole approach, it's a trap. And trust me, it almost always fails. So here's the crucial point. The real goal isn't just subtraction for the sake of subtraction. No, it's about the intentional selection of what is truly valuable, what's effective, what's meaningful to you. It's a total mindset shift from less to best. And here's exactly why just throwing stuff out doesn't work. You start discarding things kind of randomly without a clear purpose. And then, sooner or later, you realize you've thrown out something you actually needed, which, leads to a lot of frustration. And what happens next? You end up rebuying the thing you discarded, and often you buy even more stuff to compensate. It's this vicious, frustrating cycle that completely misses the entire point. So let's just redefine this whole thing right now. True minimalism, it's not an aesthetic. It's not some lifestyle trend you see on Instagram. It's a powerful cognitive skill. It's the art of finding those essential few things that deliver the most impact. This right here, this is the definition we should be working with. It doesn't matter if you're fixing an engine, running a business, or even just managing your relationships. True minimalism is about identifying those 2 or 3 starling rules, the actions that produce the vast majority of the good results, and then focusing all your energy right there. Okay, so that all sounds great in theory, right? But I know what you're thinking. How do I actually do that? How do you find those high-impact elements in your own life? Well, let's get practical. I want you to try this. It's a simple but incredibly powerful exercise. Just a few times a day, maybe every 3 or 4 hours, just pause and ask yourself 2 questions. 1, in the last few hours, what did I invest my energy, time, or emotion in? And 2, what was the return I got on that investment? You don't need a fancy app or anything, just a notebook. I promise, after just a few days of this, you won't be guessing where your energy is going anymore. You will literally see the patterns of what's working for you and what's just draining you. It's kind of like the journey of a backpacker. On their very first trip, they pack everything they think they might need. They end up with this massive 50-kilogram bag that just makes the whole journey miserable. But by their 10th trip, they've learned. That bag is down to maybe 10 kilos. It contains only what has proven its value through experience. That 4-hour log we just talked about, that's just a way to speed up that learning process in your own daily life. But, and this is really important, there's a crucial final warning here. We have to treat minimalism like a sharp tool, not like some rigid ideology or dogma.
Because honestly, like any powerful idea, it can become really dangerous if you misapply it. There's this ancient piece of wisdom that applies perfectly here. It basically says that the dose makes the poison. Think about it. Water is essential for life, but you can absolutely drown in it. Minimalism is a powerful tool for focus and efficiency for sure, but an obsession with it can lead to a really barren, joyless life. The whole key is knowing when and how much to apply it. So when should you put the tool down? Well, how about when a kid is exploring their creativity? Yeah, let them be messy and inefficient. Or when you're brainstorming new ideas. That's when you want maximum chaos and a huge quantity of ideas, not minimal precision. And sometimes you just need to experience life's rich variety for the first time without overthinking it. Remember, the goal is not deprivation. It's about being intentional.
So let's end with this thought. True minimalism, it isn't about having an empty house or an empty calendar. It's about having a full life. A life where your most precious resources, your time, your focus, your passion, are never ever wasted. So the real question I want to leave you with is this. Where in your life are you carrying a 50-kilo bag when a 10-kilo bag would do just fine?